Hello, dear friends. Here, Imtiaz Gul again with another edition of Think Tank Talk by the Center for Research and Security Studies. Today, we are going to discuss Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Washington visit and as to how the Indo-US relationship is shaping up and playing out, particularly in Asia, where China and India also seem to be caught up in a conflict of interest. One is trying to assert itself, like China, on its own, whereas the United States is using it. So it seems India as a countervailing influence as far as China is concerned. And today, to discuss this, we have with us Arif Ansar. He is associated with the PoliTact Policy Advisory Group. He's also a strategist, analyst. Thank you very much, Arif, for joining us.
Thanks, Imtiaz, for having me.
So let's start off with a basic question as to what does the latest Modi visit to Washington mean for the Indo-US relationship?
Imtiaz, obviously, we have to look at it from the perspective of the great power rivalry. That's the term that is most used in US and around the world. That's the mantra through the prism of which everything is being evaluated. One could say in not very far distant past, it was the global war against extremism. Now things have changed. So it's in this context that the visit is taking place. It's obviously a very high profile visit, a lot of expectations, a lot of challenges. But I think there is one dichotomy that is being talked a lot about, that on the one hand, US is saying that, you know, it's India is an ally with which it shares common values such as democracy, human rights, freedom of press, etc. But on the ground, something else is playing out, and that's raising concern that is India a liberal democracy or not? And if not, that what kind of an ally then India is, because if it has to counter China and Russia, then obviously freedom of expression, democracy, these are all the values that the soft power, so to say, of the US is what has led US to this status of a superpower. So how will it counter China and Russia if India is receding in those shared values? But on the contrary, there is, or at the same time, there is, hope and aspiration to have as a strategic ally to counterbalance China, obviously, most importantly.
But that seems to be the primary objective of countering China, containing its influence, its expanding influence in Asia and Africa. And for that, the Biden administration, or for that matter, any US administration, would easily gloss over human rights violations in India, particularly what is happening to the non-Hindu minorities of India, despite a stinging letter that 75 congressmen have written to the government.
Yes, and that's what I mentioned. That's the challenge. So, you know, you mentioned the letters, there are articles being written, and then article in the Foreign Affairs is one aspect of that, which it's saying that we should treat the Indian relation with the US as it is, not what we hope in the sense of, you know, the democracies, two big democracies coming together, etc. And it should be based simply on the reality of where we share interest, we should cooperate. But on other angles, we should not. For example, Marquet is arguing that we should not be so forthcoming for the technology, you know, dual use technology cooperation, or building together of a fighter jet, etc., which does not seem to benefit US in the long term. It may, on the other hand, solidify quite a bit the defense industry of India. So those are the kinds of things that are playing out, that on the one hand, US wants this relationship to grow. And there is another aspect of that, economic aspect of it, other than the security, which is, some of it came out of Corona. The term was called the decoupling of the supply chains. And it meant decoupling from China. because some of the US allies were very dependent on trade with China. And if there is a Cold War going on, if there is a great power rivalry, then it should decouple. And now that has evolved as well. Biden administration has recently said it's not decoupling per se, it's the risk management of it. So, terms change, but nonetheless,
So it basically what you are suggesting is regardless of which way you look at it, the primary objective or focus remains China as to how to contain China. I mean, whatever way you look at it. And at the back of that would be essentially geo-commercial interests of the Western world.
So definitely, because the economic prowess has made China so powerful, its inclusion into the World Trade Organization, and globalization, it benefit great deal, and it made it into a power that it has become. So there is kind of that realization that China has not played by the rules of, or has exploited and has benefited quite a bit. And now we have to kind of take a back seat and say, if it is, an adversary, then we don't want to, benefit it to that extent. But then the thought becomes that can we are we confronting or can we coexist? And that thinking is playing along as well. That sometimes we say, okay, it's moving towards confrontation, or we have to contain. Like Secretary Blinken was recently in China, where he has made the statement regarding Taiwan that Taiwan considers it does not support the independence of Taiwan, and that's obviously a big deal for China. So that suggests that there is coexistence still playing out.
But would you say this amounted to sort of appeasing China, allaying its fears, the way it had been responding to, particularly since Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, and that now finally there may be a rethink within Washington that a continuous acrimony with China may put the US economic interests at risk?
I think so. So I think for US right now, it is the primary, one of the crises that's playing out, obviously Ukraine, that's impacting everything else. And strategically, US would not want Russia and China to get closer than however close they are right now. How can it do that? Probably is another topic. What are some of the steps, etc. So it could be appeasement, but it's also the managing of the trend, and not nobody wants a conflict, but there is always a danger that something could happen. So it's managing, keeping the communication going back and forth. Obviously, this trip was delayed because of the balloon incident previously. So that broke off the communication. So that has to continue as well. Obviously, the art of diplomacy is to achieve the objective without going into conflict, and at the same time play the leverages against each other. And India is obviously one of the players in that. And in the debate becomes who's using who more, and there is also the element that India is benefiting from this divergence of policies amongst the other great powers, or Russia, China, and US, and it's positioning itself within that is buying cheap oil from Russia, is buying arms from Russia. It's not criticizing the invasion of Ukraine or so on and so forth. Yet at the same time, it's the most strategic ally of the US, because US needs India. And on
but isn't it a paradox that India, being the strategic partner of the United States, is indulging in a big way with Saudi Arabia? So is China. So Saudi Arabia is emerging as a new big power in the Middle East, which may eventually erode the US influence in the Middle East as well.
So the name of the game is, managing the relationships, and multi-polarity, as they call it. And Saudis are doing the same. That hey, we are with the West. We are not saying that we are divorcing, but at the same time, China is a reality. We want to be in SEO as well. We want to diversify, or we want to talk to everybody, as is India saying that we will talk to whoever, whether China, and India does a great deal of trade with China, and that has continued despite whatever border tensions or other things are going on. So they want to maintain that. Saudis are realizing that they can play a role that they have, like in the Sudan conflict right now that's playing out. They're trying to be a peacemaker over there. They've the Yemen situation, they have have control now. The Iran Saudi detente, all of those things that they think could have undermined them or could have played in the hands of somebody else, they are trying to eliminate those so that they can proactively engage in this new strategy where they want to be engaged with China as well as Russia and with the US. But they are saying that the reason they're doing is that because they find the West or the US to not be a reliable partner because of some of the things that have previously happened. Now, at the same time, China has injected itself quite a bit into the affairs of Middle East, and it's called that the Saudi-Iran detente was facilitated with China. How much is a debate, but it's increasingly looking at Middle East because it imports so much energy from there, that if something was to go bad there, it would impact their energy supplies. And the question is going to as far as that, can it play a role in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, since it has very good relations. China has very good relations with Israel as well. Can it be a peacemaker over there as well? So things are changing, and this is the shifting balance of power playing out.
Yeah, certainly things are changing at a very fast pace in the Middle East because also of the new synergy between Saudi Arabia and China. China has just established a strategic partnership with Palestine as well. So perhaps this is the next step that China wants to take in the Middle East to consolidate its political position in the region, but also to find a foothold in the region for more economic activity. That is probably what drives the big power rivalry as well. So thank you very much, Arif, for this candid talk. This was one think tank, PoliTact, talking to another think tank, Center for Research and Security Studies, just to trying to flesh out how the US, Indo-US China rivalry is playing out in the other regions, while smaller countries like Pakistan are getting sandwiched in this rivalry, but there are other countries like Saudi Arabia itself, which is expanding and expanding with the support of China, realizing that it shall have to break away from its traditional partnership with the United States in view of what has happened in the past few years. So that's it for today from the Think Tank Talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mutaz.